Obviously, the Sacramento Kings think Devin Carter can help them win basketball games. If they didn't, they wouldn't have drafted him. But could the Sacramento Kings view Devin Carter as their future long-term starting shooting guard? Brenden Nunes from Sactown Sports 1140 thinks so, and he joins me right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all offseason long. Today's episode is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And there's already a debate going on here in Sacramento about how good of a guard Devin Carter is compared to the other guards on this roster. Is he top 3? Is he top 4? And what does his long-term future look like in Sacramento? Well, Brenden Nunes is going to join me. We're going to dive into the possibility of the Kings viewing Devin Carter as a future starting shooting guard in this league and whether or not he can realize that potential or how much potential he has that can be realized in that sense. We also are going to talk about what we feel his day one role is with the Sacramento Kings. And I'm going to share with you in this conversation why I feel like the Kings are potentially setting themselves up to pivot away from a big swing move this offseason and make more of a smaller, shore up the rotation type move that might scare you or might bother you, but listen to it. Brenden and I will kind of hash that out a little bit. It's a great conversation. I hope you enjoy. And of course, if you want to weigh in on what we're talking about, hit us up on Twitter at MattGeorgeSack. You can email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com. And of course, get loose in the comment section down below. But for now, please enjoy my conversation with Brenden Nunes. So let me take you behind the scenes a little bit on draft night. We're sitting in the media area inside the Golden One Center, and we're all watching the draft together, all the Sacramento media, and I'm sitting next to Brenden Nunes. And the Kings announced their selection of Devin Carter with the 13th overall pick. And a lot of us are looking around going, did they just do that? Did they just take another guard? And Brenden next to me goes, yes, this is great. This is awesome. Brenden Nunes is a big believer in Devin Carter. And that led to a conversation that we were having. We were trying to figure this out. What's the Kings' thought process and stuff as we're figuring all this out. Brenden starts talking about how he believes the Kings don't just view Devin Carter as a player that can help them this upcoming season, get back to the playoffs. He believes that Devin Carter might be their answer to a long-term starting shooting guard next to De'Aaron Fox. So I'm like, you're coming on the podcast. We're hashing this out. We're talking about it. Brenden is one of the main reasons why I started to come around on the pick a little bit more to now. By the end of the night, Brenden, you and I were both fired up by that pick. So welcome into Locked On Kings, my friend. Always good to talk to you. Brenden Nunes from Sactown Sports 1140. Why do you think Devin Carter has future starting shooting guard potential here in Sactown?
What is up, Matt, and everybody that's locked on over here? I'll start by saying that I think I can be guilty of just being optimistic about every guy they pick. Like, I already know that I'm going to love Isaiah Crawford, Louisiana Tech, undrafted guy. You know, I already know. Like, I'm very guilty of these.
Where's the cutout? Get the cardboard cutout ready.
You know, it's at the station. Robert Woodard. It was a little too creepy in my room. You know, I got to admit, it's the cutout. One time I woke up in the middle of the night right after I got it, and it scared the absolute crap out of me. And I think that was the end of it. But yeah, I'll start by saying that. And I try to understand the logic in it, even if it's not necessarily the route that I would have gone. And I do think that the logic here in my mind is, I think that the only guys that should be considered when you're drafting are De'Aaron Fox, Keegan Murray, and Domantas Sabonis. And maybe Malik Monk after he signs that deal. But that's your core. Mm-hmm. I am not considering Kevin Huerter, Keon Ellis, Davion Mitchell when he was on the team. The fact that those guys are on the roster, and yes, there is a logjam at that spot and cleared up a little bit with some of the trades that happened or the trade that happened, but you don't have a long-term answer at your 2 or your 4. So why not, if you think this guy could be that, take that swing? And I think that that's potentially where we're at here. The absolute ceiling that everybody is looking for nowadays is a Derek White type, right? He's 6'3", 6'8" wingspan. Derek White has about 1.5 inches on him, but a guard that is that pesky on the defensive end. And specifically, there is a lot of on-ball stuff, but off the ball as well. That 6'8" wingspan, 6'9" wingspan really, I think, swallows up passing lanes. He's really active off the ball, a really good help defender, and there's even some rim protection, which is really where I think the Derek White thing comes in. He put up 32 blocks in 33 games during his junior year at Providence, his most recent one before coming out. I think there's just a lot of connective stuff there. And offensively, I understand the questions and why people could be like, oh, this is Davion Mitchell all over again. I think there's a big difference in the size and the way that these guys play defense.
Yeah, I'm not one for the Davion Mitchell comparison. I do understand at the time when Davion was still on the roster, the redundancy of it. And I think that's something that you and I discussed is, hey, you have now 8 guards period on your roster. But one of the things that dawned on me, and I know we discussed this a little bit, is that doesn't mean that the day you draft Devin Carter, the moment you draft Devin Carter, that he's not a top 3, top 4 guard on your roster right away. I think that's up for debate at this point in time. Your top 2 are solidified. It's Fox and Monk. Now, even though I believe Malik Monk should be your starting 2 guard going forward, I understand why he's the 6th man, and there's no reason to believe he's going to change his role now that he's returned to Sacramento. I think Mike Brown is probably going to keep him in that same role. So outside of those top 2, is it Herter? Is it Keon? Is it Carter? Who is it? Who's that next guy? So I think Monty has made it very well known, and he even said this after the draft was over, like, he approaches the draft not just to get a player that will help you today, but it is also the guy that he thinks long-term is going to be the biggest help for Sacramento. He also talked about how there are a lot of Devin Carters that you saw playing big minutes and important roles in the playoffs. And I'm sure Derek White was probably the first guy that was in Monty's mind when he said that. So
I think Derek White, sorry to interrupt you, but the other ones that came to mind since he mentioned that, Derek White, Drew Holiday, and Josh Hart are the 3 for me. And specifically more so White and Hart.
And he certainly rebounds like Josh Hart. So that's where I'm starting to pick up what you're putting down a little bit. The idea that not only does this young man have has potential as a 22-year-old rookie. I mean, he's going to be a more impactful rookie than a 18, 19-year-old coming out of college. And that's kind of been Monty's type, right? Monty has gone for older players in the draft every single year, from Tyrese to Davion to Keegan to even Colby Jones last year. He goes for older, more NBA ready players. And that is one area that I completely agree with Monty. I see no issue with drafting players who are 21, 22, 23 years old if they're going to help you right away, especially with the position that the Sacramento Kings are in. But then you start thinking about, okay, we'll get into what we think Devin Carter's day 1 role is going into training camp. But 2-3 years from now, when the Kings are hopefully in that contendership window and Carter's got a couple seasons under his belt of experience, is that where we're talking about, okay, Carter's a perfect fit next to Fox in that starting spot, assuming Malik is still coming off the bench as a 6-man role? So I'll throw that back to you. What about Devin Carter's game do you think is an ideal fit next to a ball dominant, super speedy, 3-level scorer like Fox?
Yeah, I think that you do have to start with the defense, and I'll get to the offense eventually, but the same way that you see it with Keon Ellis or whoever else when Chris Duarte was in the starting lineup for a little while, let them take care of them being Devin in this situation, Devin Carter, take care of the hardest defensive assignment when it comes to guards. I do think, ironically, the speedier guards could be an issue for him, but I think that some of the bigger guards, I think that this might be a guy that you throw on Luka. I know there's size stuff, but he plays bigger. Monty talked about it, that he expects him to be able to play up. And we know that they were in conversations and included this pick for potentially chasing Alex Caruso. And he fits the similar mold where he can just take care of all the little details. I think an elite role player that does everything that, I saw some draft analyst, I can't remember off the top of my head, say there's no 50-50 balls with Devin Carter. They're 90-10 because he is on the floor after that. The Kings need a guy like that. They need a guy with a little bit of fire. The other thing Monty says, you mentioned, productive players, older. The other thing he mentions is just he's a winner. He wins games. does all the little things. He's locked in until the last possession. They're up 7 at the end of a close game, playing defense with 40 seconds left. He's not taking a break, and letting them get a layup just because it's only 2 points, we're upset. He's essentially, putting it cliche, a dog in a way. And I think that the Kings need a little bit more of that, specifically on the defensive end. I really think that the off-ball wrecking havoc stuff, being a defensive playmaker, again, to the Davion thing. Davion is a really good defender. I think he's very disciplined, slides his feet well, and uses his strength. I wouldn't call him a defensive playmaker, though. He's not turning teams over necessarily, just stopping them, which just variances there, but they both have their strengths to it. But creating turnovers and getting out in transition is absolutely something that Sacramento was good at last year, and I think will continue to be able to do so. Devin Carter also set the combine record for three-quarter sprint, 2.87. He tied this draft class's first or best vertical leap at 42 inches. He gets off the ground really fast too. Yeah. And with that 6'8" wingspan, that combination of stuff, I really think he plays bigger than he is. Another guy that comes to mind is Bruce Brown, who he has really similar measurables to. And you've seen that guy play in the 4 and the 5 at times on certain teams. So I think the defensively, it's easy for me to see how it fits. Offensively could be a little bit more complicated. Now, Devin Carter took a really big jump between his sophomore and junior season at Providence, really as a creator, kind of becoming the guy essentially on that team. And I think that there is some interesting playmaking stuff there. The shooting is going to be the biggest swing factor here. He shot 37.7% from 3 last year on 6.8 attempts a game, by the way, like
high volume,
very high volume. And that stands out even more so when you look at the year prior where he only took 3.5, practically doubled his attempts, but that was also on 29.9% in his sophomore year. You go back to his freshman year at South Carolina, 26.7% on 2 a game. That's where, you get a little Davion Mitchell in here where you're like, oh God, they're betting on the improvement. But I think there's also an aspect of Monty McNair called him one of, if not the best work ethics in the class. Again, a la Davion Mitchell. But I think that is encouraging to them for continued progress because the shooting is going to be a big thing. Obviously, you have to be able to space the floor to be able to play next to Fox and Sabonis. That's what we've seen with a couple different guys on this roster, that they only play one end of the floor. And it's also something Monty mentioned. They want a guy that plays both. And I think the offense is more what needs to be pieced together for Carter, that shooting specifically, but there's good cutting. I mentioned, obviously, that length and vertical. He finishes well around the rim, and he's dunking the ball. Like he's getting up there. I think he's weirdly a lob threat also. Like if you find him in the right spot in transition, or if he sneaks into a dunker spot, like there's a couple plays, he's pointing up, like throw it, So I think that there are aspects of him being a smart player offensively, connective, good passer, good cutter, but really that swing factor offensively in my mind is the shot, because I'm buying the defense.
So a couple things here. If you can bottle up the mid to high 30s 3-point percentage and say that's what he's going to be for his NBA career, you have a fit. Because if you're capable of stretching the floor and knocking down the 3 at a clip that you have to respect, to where you punish if guards double team Fox or Sabonis and leave him, you punish him, or they can't double team because they always have to keep an eye out for you. He doesn't have to be a 40 plus 3-point percent shooter to do that. What he can't be is a guy where beyond the first maybe couple seasons of his career, the game plan for opposing teams is, if he beats us, so be it. We tip our cap, right? You have to punish that kind of defensive approach that he's going to face, and pretty much any rookie or young player faces when they're put into an offense with stars like Fox and Sabonis and Monk and Keegan to some extent. Like, he is going to be dared to shoot, and he has to be willing to not just make that shot and take that shot. He has to be willing to shoot it with confidence. So that's kind of the offensive side of things. But 2 indirect ways I think he influences the offense, Devin, or Brenden, excuse me. I'm going to pretend you're Devin Carter and talk to you like I know what the hell I'm talking about. He, to me, like, I think his rebounding is a tremendous deal. Like, you talk about him playing bigger than he is. You don't average almost 9 rebounds a game as a 6'2" guard without playing exactly that way. And I thought Monty gave us one of the best answers Monty's ever given us, period, when I asked him about Devin, his rebounding. And Monty just went into great detail about not only how that's a transitional skill or translatable skill to the NBA. He talked about what that says about Devin as a player, how smart he is, how strong he is, how savvy he is, the high basketball IQ. Went into great detail about that. If you haven't heard Monty's quote on Devin Carter's rebounding, go and listen to that and check that out. But I think his rebounding actually benefits Sacramento offensively. Now, I think a majority of his rebounding is probably going to be more on the defensive end than the offensive end, but he has a nose for the ball. So he can buy the Sacramento Kings extra possessions, or at the very least secure the ending of a good defensive possession, which has been a problem for this Kings team. Finally, the last indirect way I think he influences the offense, and the same thing can be said for Keon Ellis, and this can't be understated. Having multiple guys that you can throw at the opposing team's best guard to take that responsibility off of De'Aaron Fox's shoulders, I think opens up a whole new realm of possibility for De'Aaron. Now, De'Aaron has to actually step through that door, step through that window and take it. That to me removes all semblance of an excuse of De'Aaron can't put in the effort to be a 30-point per game scorer every night. We saw De'Aaron be that to start last season. He was averaging 30 points per game the first month of the season and was up there with the best scorers in the league. It kind of tapered off a little bit with the injuries that he suffered a little bit, plus just getting through the dog days, middle of the season and stuff like that. But 2 years ago, Devin, you remember that, or Jesus, Brenden, you remember this. Fox had to guard the opposing team's best guard, not just in the fourth quarter, but period. And still was trying to make offensive leaps because of that. So the Kings having more assets like Keon, like Devin Carter, to take some of that defensive responsibility off of De'Aaron, I think massively influences Sacramento's ability on the offensive end.
For sure. And I think Keegan goes into that as well. I think one of the biggest things with stars in the league is you're not going to stop them. You just got to try to slow them down. And the worst thing you can do is give them a heavy dose of the exact same thing. You know, if you have one good defender, I mean, look at Boston. Boston is throwing so many different guys on Luka. And to be fair, they have a lot of options. Sure. But I think that Sacramento's trying to get to that point where they have more. And to your point of allowing De'Aaron to maybe exert more effort on the offensive end, or I can't think of quite the proper way to say it, but give him less responsibility defensively throughout the course of the game. So that way he can optimize his offense. Yeah. I think the other optimistic thing about Devin Carter is that when he took that jump sophomore to junior year, he already had the defense in the sophomore year. And then junior year, he's like, oh, you need me to score more? Okay, I'm going to do that. And he's still playing defense. He's still playing defense the same level, you know, on both sides of the floor. The rebounding happened because early in the year, middle of the year, whenever it may have happened, their big man went down. And he's like, we need boards. So what do? Went out and got 8+ boards a game and is still doing everything else, you know? And I think that's the encouraging part, that yes, you can lessen the load on De'Aaron Fox on the defensive end, but still use him and the talents that he has there to switch things up based on who they may be guarding. And Devin can just fill in all the little things in an ideal world if he does end up working out that way. And, so, you know, to the 3-point shooting really quick, sorry. Mentioned he doesn't have to be great. Josh Hart, who, again, a guy I think is a solid comp here, 31% from 3 last year on 3 a game. You know, and obviously New York would like that to go up. Right. He's playing 40+ minutes in the playoffs, if not every single minute of a game.
Played every minute.
Goes. Yeah,
literally every minute.
You know, still productive.
Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by GameTime. We're in the summer months now. We're still a pretty decent ways off from the start of the NBA season, unfortunately. But a good way to kill that time is, of course, going to a baseball game. Hey, it's America's pastime for a reason. And GameTime is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting tickets faster and easier. Prices on the GameTime app actually go down the closer that you get to your game or event. And they have tickets not just for sporting events, but of course for concerts, big and small, shows at your local theater or comedy club, whatever the case may be. GameTime has got the tickets for you, and they have last minute deals where you can save up to 60% off buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. They have flash deals where you can save even more with exclusive in-app deals on select seats ahead of a certain game or event. Their all-in pricing is a big deal. No hidden fees that shock you when you're at the checkout. What they say your prices are is what the price is. You can toggle this feature on. The fees will be included. So it's not like you're thinking, okay, I'm going to buy 2 seats for $80 and it ends up being $120 with all the hidden fees that they have layered in there. No of those surprises. Plus you get amazing seat views and their lowest price guarantee, where GameTime will credit you 110% of the difference if they are not the lowest price. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Let's fast forward to training camp. Now, I think we're both in agreement that the way the roster looks right now is not how it's going to look in training camp. So take everything that we're saying with kind of that grain of salt. We believe Devin Carter is going to be a part of this team. I don't see the Kings trading him. What are we thinking, or what are we expecting his day one role to be? We expect him to impact winning and influence winning and actually be on the floor. We expect him to probably be a part of the rotation right away. But he's still a 22-year-old. Even though he's 22 years old, he's still a rookie. He's still acclimating to the NBA. The game is faster. It's on a completely different level. Not that he can't handle it. It's just different, right? And it's a lot to ask a rookie to make a significant impact. What the Kings asked of Keegan Murray his rookie season a couple years ago, that's a lot to ask from a good team. Typically, lottery picks are playing on bad teams where they can put up stats but ease their way into things. So I don't necessarily, as much as we believe Devin Carter could be a future starter for Sacramento, I don't expect that to be his role day one with the way this roster is. As of right now, I would expect Keon Ellis to still be the starter, assuming Malik Monk is coming off the bench, and also assuming that Kevin Huerter's gone. I just don't see Kevin Huerter being a part of this roster going forward. What would you, if you were to write in pencil right now, what you think Devin Carter's role is going to be for the Sacramento Kings to start the season? It could change over the course of the year, but just to start the year, what is that role?
Yeah, like you kind of prefaced, it's a pretty tough question not knowing what the roster is going to look like. Kevin definitely seems kind of like the odd man out here, but if he is still on the team, I would kind of bet that he's still in that starting spot. It's really between him and Keon. But I think that Devin will get opportunity early for sure. I think that he will be in the rotation from day one. I heard Sam Vecini. And for what it's worth, every draft expert, I don't know if you guys have realized the same thing, every draft expert is in love with Devin Carter.
Yeah,
great grades on everybody that really dove into the draft and all this stuff. Love this guy, which I think says something. I've yet to see somebody be like, what's going on here? Some guys question his shot and things like that. But Sam Vecini compared him to Jaime Jaquez of sorts in the impact he expects him to have early in the league, specifically in that aspect. And I think that you could get that a little bit. I think that we're talking somewhere between 15 to 20 minutes throughout the course of this year. You know, Davion Mitchell's rookie year is a little bit of an outlier because I think in that second half, De'Aaron ended up going down. He played a lot and started. That was 27 minutes his rookie year. But I think more of his sophomore year where there was health, Domas was on the team at this point, 18.1 minutes per game for Davion in that second year. I think that's roughly what we could be talking about with Devin. And how I'd imagine is that, you know, there's going to be some sense of an adjustment to a certain point. I think that on-ball defense could, that is where you could see that, some of getting through screens and obviously some of the offensive stuff. But I think that there's going to be aspects that he provides pretty early. He's a Mike Brown guy, like you've pointed out a lot, or at least just screams Mike Brown, right? So I think that it's going to be hard for Mike to see him in practice and be like, you know, I think this guy needs to play more. Yeah. And so I think I would guess that as the year goes on, we'll see more and more opportunity for Devin, but I think he's going to be in the rotation playing 15 to 20 minutes a night and pretty dependent on how that specific night goes, how much more he may get in the variance there. But I could see him starting by the end of the year if it goes right.
He seems to me like someone right away that the Kings can essentially unleash. Like, hey, kid, go be yourself, which is play hard-nosed defense, dive for 50-50 or 90-10 balls, and rebound. Like, if you bring the effort in all areas from Providence to the NBA, and that's what you bring to the table right away, if you provide that alone, minus the scoring, minus the shooting, there's a spot for you and you can impact winning. Because Mike has been preaching rebounding from everybody for the last 2 years. Even with the best rebounder on his roster, back-to-back seasons, Domantas Sabonis is the rebound champion both years that Mike Brown has been here in Sacramento, and still he's calling for more rebounding by committee from everybody else. You get that rebounding from Devin Carter right away, it probably won't be 8 to 9 boards a game because he won't have that much playing time. But if you can get 4 to 5 boards from a 6'2" guard in 15 to 20 minutes of play, there's a spot for him. If you can get someone that can relieve Keon Ellis after Keon puts in a shift of 6 to 7 straight minutes out of the gate guarding Kyrie or whoever the opposing team's best guard is and is a little bit gassed. You put Devin in, it's, hey, pick up where he left off, and you just unleash him like a Tasmanian devil almost. Just get out there and make an impact. Then we can start talking about incorporating that three-point shot. How do you fit into the offense? And that's not to say that the Kings aren't going to use training camp and practices and game and film to try and improve Carter's overall game. It's not like he is perfect in all aspects, but to me, he's just not a guy that the Kings are going to have to worry about, or Mike Brown's going to have to worry about at all, giving it his all as soon as he throws him in off the bench. So whatever game one is, whether it's in Sacramento or on the road, whatever city against whatever team, 8 minutes into the ball game, point to Devin Carter, put him in the game and say, kid, make an impact and let Devin go. I think that's where I could see, like, this is what he can do day one. And then you have that foundation. Now you layer in upon that how you get him to that potential starter that you want him to be.
And I feel like we've seen Mike want to have those type of guys or try to make other people that guy for years now. You know, Mo Harkless might be before Mike, but KZ Okpala, you know, or Chris Duarte getting a try last year, Kessler Edwards, I think falls into that again. It really stood out to me when he said guys that play both ends of the floor that can play in the playoffs, because Kevin Huerter plays offense. Davion Mitchell plays defense. Keon Ellis is more of a defensive player and there's some offense developing there. But the idea for Devin is supposed to be able to function on both sides of the floor here. So I definitely see the optimism, and I think that the edge that he brings is also something the Kings could use. Now we'll see what level that may exist on this Kings team. But, you know, I mentioned the cliche dog thing earlier, but he's, you know, windmill dunk in transition as a 6'2", 6'3" guy, and then giving a look at the camera afterwards, you know, or he just has this energy to him that I think the Kings really could use at times.
I got a feeling, Brenden, he's going to get some pretty loud ovations pretty quickly in Sacramento, not just because of him checking into the game for the first time, but seeing what he can potentially do, and whether it's throwing down a dunk or a big defensive moment or diving for a loose ball. I think Kings fans are going to fall in love with this guy really, really quick. If they don't during the California Classic or Summer League, which I know he's dealing with the shoulder issue, but we'll see if he plays or not. Locked On Kings is also brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, LED headlights, exhaust kits, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or you get your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Before we wrap up, I'll transition to one more thing. We've been talking all offseason long about, is this the time to make the swing? Whether it was Zach LaVine or Kyle Kuzma or even Bridges to some extent, who the Knicks went out and traded 5 first-round picks for. Like, is this the time for Monty and the Kings to strike? A lot of us felt that draft night would have been an ideal time to strike, using the 13th pick in a trade. Ultimately, of course, they didn't decide to do that, drafting Devin Carter. I'm kind of feeling, just vibes that I'm feeling right now, Brenden, I feel like we're starting to transition and move away from that. By making this trade that the Kings made with the Toronto Raptors, sending Davion Mitchell, Sasha, a couple second rounders for Jalen McDaniels, they opened up a little more financial flexibility. $7 million under the luxury tax, almost $15 million underneath the first apron. That's an MLE. Whether you're going out and getting a player for that MLE, or now you have a little more flexibility to take in a little bit of salary in a trade. I think back to the comments of Mike Brown and Monty McNair specifically at the end of the season, where they talked about they don't feel they're that far away. The Kings at this point in time, with the addition of Carter, having Monk return, maybe the addition of a Dorian Finney-Smith or Cam Johnson that's not going to break the bank and go out to get, they might think that that's enough right there to get them to phase 2, still with their assets intact after this Kevin Huerter trade scenario fallout gets done with Atlanta, to make that Mikal Bridges huge swing the Knicks just made next year or in a future year if they truly at that time feel that they're one piece away. Because even if they go out and get a star right now, Brenden, there still are question marks with this core about legitimately contending in the West. The Kings might not be ready to make that big swing yet. And I know that's going to frustrate some Kings fans to hear because they're tired of being patient after 2 quiet trade deadlines in last offseason. But I wonder if that's where the Kings are trending.
Yeah, I think running it back would be insanity to do that 2 years in a row. And just for the sake of us content creators, Matt, please don't. Come on. Gosh. I get the frustration from the fan base, but I can only try to justify things for so long. It does seem like there are going to be some changes. To what extent is another question. And I think that your wording of when is the right time to do that is a good starting point, because in my mind, reading between the lines, what we've seen from this front office, I think the right time is when they see the right deal and they have a certain amount of almost wiggle room until their backs are against the wall. And I don't feel like we're at that point. I understand the want for progress, and I'm sure that's getting pushed from higher ups as well. But, and of course, like, you need progress, but I think you could even argue last year there was some important internal progress that will help going forward in the future. So I would say that it's about making sure it's the right move, because it's worse to take a big swing and for it to be wrong. That sets you back for years.
Yeah. And you're stuck.
You're totally screwed, compared to, we don't love this. Like, let's wait until the deadline and see if there's something better. Like, you have to be picky when we're talking a huge swing. And I think that this front office, I would describe them as picky. And I think that's a good thing. Calculated, opportunistic, however you want to word it. But that's how they feel to me. Yeah, very patient, which is why when I see a move like Davion Mitchell, Sasha Vezenkov getting essentially dumped for second round picks, and Jalen McDaniels, I don't think Jalen McDaniels matters at all. I have like Kessler Edwards level of expectations, and if he outperforms it, great. But it doesn't really do anything for me. Expiring contract, freed up about, I think it's about $8 million. Like you said, they can use the MLE. And with how patient and what I feel like calculated they have been, I'd imagine that's a precursor to another move. Now, maybe it has to be, right?
It has to be. It doesn't make any sense if it's
not just, we need less guards on this roster. Like, there's no way it's just that. Especially with, like you mentioned, how patient they've been. I'd imagine that there's a logic here. It wouldn't surprise me if Sunday, the second free agency opens, that they use that MLE right away and already have something in mind. And that's why this happened when it did. But I think you can take gradual steps and wait for that right opportunity, because it has to be the right one. My timeline, my deadline in a way, before you need to do that, is when Keegan gets his extension, because that's when your books get complicated. So I think, to me, like, this offseason obviously seems like an ideal time to do it. I'm kind of thinking the deadline is the most where I'm like, okay, I really hope that you've at least taken some minimal level swing, found another ideal, like, we don't know what Devin Carter would necessarily be, but that sort of ideal role player at the 4 spot, even if it's just that sort of improvement by the deadline, offseason, or whatever, I think that's fine. The big swing, I think it's right to be patient, and opportunistic. I think that's exactly what they did with Sabonis. Sabonis's value was fairly low at that time. And I know Tyrese Halliburton ended up being more than what anybody or most people expected him to potentially be, but they sent out no picks in that deal.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big value. And I think that they could be waiting for a moment to capitalize on something when it comes to those big stars. And I think that's the right way to do it. But gradual progress and continuing to form the roster in the meantime is important. The Nuggets traded for KCP the year before they got Aaron Gordon, so you can slowly build up and improve the depth and important role pieces before you eventually take that swing for the star. And it kind of feels like we're in the latter stage, just waiting on the ideal star to become available.
That being said, I do understand any Kings fan listening who cringed at the idea of waiting till the trade deadline again, based on how the last couple, like, there's you have to have a level of faith in your general manager to know when the time is right. But also the clock's been ticking for 2 years, and these guys are only getting older and older, and you're getting closer and closer to extensions, including De'Aaron Fox, who's going to be seeking max money and is going to be playing, I think, his ass off to make an all-NBA team so he can get that super max. So, I mean, yes, you can be patient compared to teams like the Suns or the Clippers or the Lakers, but not super patient when OKC and Minnesota have jumped you and you have the Rockets and the Spurs biting at your heels a little bit. So it's an interesting position to be in. Brenden, before I let you go, you're working on a piece about Devin Carter, right? Let us know what's going on with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Diving into kind of all the film on Devin. Been watching a lot of Providence games. I will, a little transparency here. I'm a YouTube TV guy, and the unlimited DVR a couple of years ago in the draft, I went through. I was like, I have every NBA team on there. I add a bunch of stuff. I'm like, one day I'm just going to add everything. It'll be here. Never have to worry about it again. A couple of drafts ago, I want to say it's the Tyrese draft. I went through all the top 60 picks and was like, I'm going to add every college on here. Providence, not one of them. Ooh. So hasn't been the easiest way to watch film, but figuring it out. Going to have a lot of film in that piece and really planning on diving into everything that I think he can bring, and specifically how it translates to the Kings, and answering some of the questions that we dove into here about, everybody freaking out about there being a lot of guards, which is understandable.
Well, keep your eye out for that on Sactown Sports 1140. Brenden Nunes, also, of course, on the Kings Pulse podcast, on the Return of the Roar. You see him featured on the Kings Beat podcast with Sean and James over there. He does a ton of stuff and still nice enough to join us here on Locked On Kings. Brenden, thank you, my man. We'll talk soon.
No problem, Matt. I appreciate you. And I am going to throw one more thing out here, not to steal your platform. Matt and I have been playing a lot of games. Okay. I'm going to throw this out here. If anybody listening is interested in playing MLB The Show, which, by the way, playing with Frank and Chris too, and we're trying to convince more people, or League of Legends, or, we could talk about other games. I think we could expand our horizons a little bit, but I would love to play with some Kings fans if you're up for it.
I would be down to play as well. Just be aware, Brenden doesn't take it seriously, and I take it too seriously. So we're the worst combination. But it's all in good fun. But we'll see you on the sticks, buddy.
For sure.